Located on the scenic Kancamagus Highway in the White Mountain National Forest, the Russell-Colbath homestead, though small in scale, remains an important symbol of 19th century rural life in the Passaconaway Valley of northern New Hampshire. Managed by the U.S. Forest Service, the Russell-Colbath House offers a glimpse into life on a homestead and provides a sense of the struggle for survival and settlement in this remote mountain valley. This photo is from the early 1900s, when the homestead also served as the Passaconaway Post Office. Seated is Mrs. Ruth Priscilla Colbath, who served as the first postmistress in the valley from 1892 to 1907. A homestead typically consisted of a rustic dwelling, a small garden, and a barn for livestock. Each of these were elements of the Russell-Colbath homestead. In 1831, notes the U.S. Forest Service, Thomas Russell purchased the land that would become the Russell-Colbath homestead. 1 year later, with the help of his son, Amzi, the farmhouse was built. Amzi would eventually purchase the house from his father, where he would live with his wife and 5 daughters, one of whom was Ruth Russell. Originally located across the street from the Russell-Colbath homestead, the Passaconaway School was maintained until about 1910, when it was privately purchased and relocated. Note the children without shoes. At its peak in the 1850s, the community of Passaconaway, while not bustling, hosted a mixture of permanent and transient residents, many of whom worked at the local farms, mills, or lumber operations. The homesteaders in the Passaconaway Valley, in their attempt to eke out a living, changed the landscape. They cut trees for firewood and building materials, plowed fields, and struggled to raise crops. When this photo was taken, Albany was 95% farmland. By 1976, only 5% of that farmland remained. The photo was reproduced from a Christmas postcard sent in 1907 by Ruth Priscilla Colbath to a friend. Amzi Russell died in 1877. His widow, Eliza, eventually deeded the homestead to her daughter, Ruth, and husband, Thomas Colbath. According to writer Marshall Hudson in an article in New Hampshire Magazine, a logging job had brought Thomas to the Passaconaway Valley, where he had met Ruth. Thomas and Ruth continued to farm the land and care for the aging Eliza, who lived with the couple until her death. One fall afternoon in 1891, Thomas said to his wife, I'll be back in a little while." He explained that he was off to do some errands. As day gave way to night, Ruth placed an oil lamp in a window to help Thomas find his way home, but Thomas didn't return that night, nor the next day. Ruth never saw Thomas again. She remained alone in the house where she was born, waiting for her husband to return. Remarkably, she lit the oil lamp in the window every night for the next 39 years in the hope that Thomas would find his way home. Logging operations along the Swift River greatly influenced the development of the Passaconaway Valley. Forests were a source of wealth and income to many homesteaders. Workers risked their lives daily on the rugged terrain and dangerous log drives along the Swift River. Hunting and trapping provided food and clothing for families and income for homesteaders. Selling and trading furs was common practice in the primitive backcountry. The first settlers traveled on foot or horseback as wagon roads did not exist, making commerce difficult. The town road to Passaconaway, now the Kankamogus Highway, was laid out in 1837 to avoid expensive bridge crossings. The new road made travel by horse and ox-drawn carriage possible. In the late 19th century, small-scale railroads were constructed in the valley to facilitate logging operations. Rail travel also provided Passaconaway Valley residents with a new connection to the outside world. The vast, open Passaconaway Valley and majestic White Mountains inspired artists such as Benjamin Champney and many other curious travelers. The late 19th and early 20th century also saw a rise of tourism in the area. Inns were built and large farmhouses were used as boarding houses for visitors. White pines were prized as far back as 1691, when an English law declared all New Hampshire white pines with a diameter of 24 inches or more the property of the Crown's Royal Navy to be used for ships' masts. Russell-Colbath died in 1930 at the age of 80. 3 years after her death, Thomas returned home. Asked about his 42-year absence, he claimed that he had no quarrel with his wife. Thomas had remained in the area for about a year and then wandered farther away. It has been suggested that Thomas made his way to Cuba and then on to Panama, where he worked digging the Panama Canal. Other versions of the story have him out west, working on the railroads. In any event, after being gone for a while, he was ashamed to return to his wife and home. Upon his return home, Thomas was told by his neighbors that his wife had died and that the home had been sold. Ruth was buried in a small cemetery within sight of the house she was born in. Thomas, meanwhile, would wander away and was never seen again.